I think for teachers and tutors, they've got sometimes that personal element with children that maybe when I go in, it's not quite as direct in terms of that child is with that person maybe every day at school. So when I come in, it can be a small release. It's someone different, maybe someone else they can sound off. Actually, now in primary schools, resilience is spoken about quite a bit. I think a lot of young people are aware of what resilience is. So it's not quite the complicated educational word it used to be, where you'd think, oh, I don't really know what resilience is. The Sky remote, when you're trying to get a program, you have to go you just have to talk in an English accent. Doesn't understand.
Can you do your best impression of talking to a Sky remote?
Give me a TV show. It would be like Breaking Bad, South Park. Because if you go South Park, it's like, what? Because there's nothing worse than when you start feeling angry about something and someone's like, oh, remember that breathing? And you're like, what breathing? I've not been practicing it. Once you start this journey of, being an entrepreneur, it's just, where does it stop? Because you just get more, it's like a snowball effect. You start off really small and then things just escalate and escalate. So I'm so thrilled to be doing something that I don't even consider a job, to be honest.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor Podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and, hopefully, inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for hundreds of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learned about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today?
Hi, my name is Ludo Miller, the host of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. A warm welcome today to the guest of this episode, who's Karen Gibb. So welcome, Karen.
Hi, Ludo. Thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute privilege and a pleasure. As a brief introduction, Karen is the founder and director of Mind Marvels, which is an organisation that works with councils in Scotland to help neurodiverse children and students, many of whom present as autistic and ADHD, understand their own challenges, build their own resilience, and really improve their own emotional well-being. So these are skills that children will take with them for life. And I'm already so excited to see how Karen's approach can help you, the listener, the educator, to change your students' lives for the better. And if you're lucky, you might even find out a bit more about the animal brain today, which is something that Karen may give us a little insight into today. No promises, but perhaps if you're lucky. So thank you so much, Karen, for joining us. And I think we'll dive straight in, as we so often do, with our first question, which is, Karen, what is your why as an educator?
Oh, such a great question. What is, my why? I think for me, it's to have someone that I needed or I aspired to have when I was a youngster. So when I was young, I was always very hyperactive, but underneath that sort of hyperactivity was a lot of anxiety. And I don't know if that ever was really recognised or maybe understood by myself, never mind anyone else. So really what I aspire to be is just somebody that young people can look up to in particular and seek advice and guidance from.
That's a really powerful way of approaching the work you do, Karen. Do you feel that you've been able to do that in the kind of sector of work that you're in?
Absolutely. It's so powerful, this work that I do, because straight away young people and children will say to me, Karen, that really helped. Or last week I felt like I was, unhappy when I was out shopping with my mum, for example. So what I did was I took 3 deep breaths and then instantly felt better. So it's really, really like small increment, just really helps young people to develop their emotional well-being and develop the skills that come along with that, such as resilience and just having that sound information about their own mental health. I mean, that just was not available when I was young. It was very scripted. It was very like, talk to an adult if you feel, overwhelmed, etc. But there wasn't, I don't believe there were strategies and things like mindfulness, yoga, meditation. It was weird. It was perceived as weird. It was perceived as maybe part of a cult or almost very spiritual, which of course it can be, but there's so many different elements to how we can allow ourselves to feel calm and have calming strategies that actually this knowledge is just, we're just at the surface of this. There's so much more that we can spread and give as guidance to young people, but also to adults as well, and especially teachers and tutors that are finding themselves in that kind of really stressful, high impact environments.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, being in touch with your mental health doesn't make you a yogi, does it? It doesn't make you some kind of spiritual leader. It may do, but it's not equated to that. It's certainly much more kind of personable, much more everyday than that. It doesn't have to be that kind of unattainable kind of special attribute. So absolutely. So I gave a brief introduction just now, but do you mind just going a little bit more into kind of what the life of Karen Gibb looks like on the weekly schedule of Karen Gibb looks like?
Sure. So I previously was a teacher. I taught politics in high school, and very early on, I thought mainstream education isn't necessarily where I want to be. So then I developed my sort of, this is where my interest for wellbeing came from. I worked in social work and I worked in behavioural schools for teenage boys that perhaps were expelled from mainstream school. And from there on, I really developed this interest into emotional wellbeing. And a couple of years ago, I kind of had this brainwave where I was like, I could just set up a business and go into schools and do this. Because me as a teacher, I would sit and watch workshops and things happening, and they weren't always that great. If I'm being honest, and that's not to discredit all workshops in schools, but I just had this feeling that I could do things better and I could do it with my own personal touch. I could add in stories of my own childhood. And that's where sort of Mind Marvels was born. So that was back in 2019. I then worked as a supply teacher for a couple of years, right up until COVID. And then I thought, this is it, I've just got to push this out there. And I'm so glad I did. So my sort of average week can be visiting schools, visiting nurseries, talking with families online. It can be delivering talks to banks and places where families, people have families and they want to improve their own wellbeing. I also develop resources at home. So it's a real mixed bag every week, but I absolutely love it. I love being my own boss and I love the freedom that it allows me. It has just been so rewarding. And actually now I could never go back to employment. I've totally sort of just seen the other way, and I know there's so much more that Mind Marvels can do now, but also in the future we want to continually expand and just move the business and keep it going. It's got such a strong brand. I've got this bright orange and purple car that I drive around in that's all fully branded, and it's a bit like the Pied Piper when you turn up at school, because all the kids are like, there's Karen from Mind Marvels.
I love the analogy, but you have to be wary of that one, Karen.
Yeah, absolutely. In a positive way.
Yeah, of course.
But it's great. I just love it. Yeah.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to see the bright car coming past. Maybe an ice cream truck is a better analogy than the pipe.
That's true. it's we've turned that story around, but it's just really it's just so great. The kids love, like, when Mind Marvels come into school, it's the greatest escape and release for them, because they can just learn so many different things that can help them with feeling calm.
Yeah, that's such a key release for a child who's struggling, isn't it? Is to know that there's something else coming into school. There's someone else coming into school to provide that escape.
Absolutely. And I think for teachers and tutors, they've got sometimes that personal element with children that maybe when I go in, it's not quite as direct, in terms of that child is with that person maybe every day at school. So when I come in, it can be a small release. It's someone different, maybe someone else they can sound off. Maybe it's somebody that, because we don't necessarily have that really strong relationship as, a teacher and a pupil, then actually it's a different dynamic. When I go in, schools always say, is it Miss? Is it Miss Gibb? No, it's Karen, because I want to set that apart straight away. I don't want them to see me as somebody in authority. I want them to see me as somebody that was like them as a child, and now, can provide ways for young people to feel calm. And I think what's really important is it's not just children with, ADHD or diagnosed sort of, I guess, things that they have. It's more that young people we all suffer from anxiety, we all have stress, we all have things that happen to us that are out with our control. And it's what we do when we have those feelings, or when we have those thoughts, or when those situations do happen. It's how we react, because that's the only thing ultimately that we have control over. We can't control necessarily the situations that are thrown at us, but we can control sometimes our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviours after those situations happen or during. And that's what's really, really powerful.
So how do you kind of support, how do you teach children to be able to understand their emotions in situations that they've not experienced before?
It's true. So we base every session on the NHS 5 steps to mental wellbeing. So every single session that I run has these 5 elements in it: learn, move, connect, mindful, and be kind. So what we'll do is we teach a little bit about the brain, a little bit of mindful movement, a little bit of peer or self-massage, breathing techniques, mindfulness, and then gratitude and positive thinking. So although we're not teaching for scenarios happening, it's, well, when you feel stressed, what could you do? When you feel angry, what could you do? So they have this little toolbox, if you like, of different things that they can have when they do feel different emotions. And I think that's what's powerful. It's not necessarily that, when XYZ happens, this is what you need to do. It's more, here's your toolbox, choose which ones you like, because just like adults, there's things that children love and there's things that other children don't like. So it's, here's a variety, which ones work for you? Great, you've got 2, 3, 4 strategies. Remember them and also practice them when things aren't stressful, because there's nothing worse than when you start feeling angry about something and someone's like, oh, remember that breathing? And you're like, what breathing? I've not been practicing it. So it's all about embedding that daily or even weekly with the young people, so that actually when that crisis happens, they're then able to go, yes, I remember about my hug button, or I remember about that, specific breathing technique. And that's when it can really be powerful, when they've always had that kind of instilled in their life, and it just becomes sort of normality to use it.
So this must mean that you work with students over kind of quite a long period of time then, doesn't it? Because these are not things that can be taught or even improved kind of overnight.
No, and it's always a work, and I always tell children they need to practice this as much as they possibly can as well, because I can only be there to deliver a session. I'm not going to be there, 24/7, at any step or any crisis in their life. So I generally run sessions between kind of 4 to 8 week blocks in schools, When it's one-to-one online, it can be a bit more impactful in terms of less sessions because it is that one-to-one sort of interaction. But I think as long as they start to learn different strategies or ones that they can pick up really easily, then actually even one session can make a difference to that young person's life.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a key thing to remember, isn't it? Is that even if you feel a session or a series of sessions, there's not a lot of progress being made, it's pretty important to remember that even just one out of those series can have had a really big impact. And kids being kids, they're not prone to giving, they're not used to giving feedback. So something might have really impacted them in a positive way without them letting you know, without you realizing that.
To join the growing number of qualified tutors, enrol now for the Level 3 qualification for tutors. This 8-week online facilitated course covers the roles and responsibilities involved in teaching and learning, with a particular focus on inclusion, assessment, and feedback. Upon completion, you'll be awarded a Level 3 in education and training from Ofqual recognised training provider Highfield Qualifications. You will also gain a Qualified Tutor Quality Mark, the independent quality mark for tutors. Whatever your starting point, a qualification for tutors has to be the next step. Enroll today at qualifiedtutor.org/training.
Now, I'm gonna force this conversation in the way of the animal brain, because although I said that our listeners might want to hear it, what I actually meant was that I want to hear a little bit more about it. So being selfish here.
No, that's okay. I've left the animals in the car as well, but I will explain it as best I can.
Okay. Well, the floor is yours, Karen. Tell us a little bit more about the animal brain.
Sure. So we have in fact, I've got a little diagram. Let me just go grab it for you. So we have got our brain and we have got these 3 animals that live inside our brain. So as I say to young people, it's not real animals, it's parts of our brain that act like animals. So the first one we have is the hippocampus, which is an elephant, because elephants never forget. And this is all about our memory. So it's, what we remembered yesterday or what we remembered from our very first day at school. So the elephant never forgets. Then we have our owl, which is our prefrontal cortex. So our owl is the part of our brain that makes all the wise decisions, so all our good choices. And then we have the amygdala, which is our meerkat, and this is our fight, flight, or freeze response. So how I explain it to young people is when our brain perceives there's danger, our meerkat starts to jump up and down to alert that there's danger. And the wise owl that helps us make the good decisions then flies away. So to bring back the wise animal so that all the animals can work together in the brain, we need to basically calm the meerkat. And the best way to calm the meerkat is to calm ourselves so that the meerkat then feels calm and all the animals work together really well in the brain. That is it in a whistle-stop tour.
Yeah, that you did as well as you could have done in the short time the short time frame I gave you. And also, podcast listeners obviously won't be able to see the map there. So if you've understood that, then Karen's done an amazing job. But you can find out more on Karen's website, mindmarvels.co.uk.
Yep, there's a little fancy diagram on there.
Yeah, there is the same fancy one that you had in your hand just a moment ago. So the link to that will be in the show notes below. But starting to see how those 3 parts of the brain work, and obviously relating that to a way that kids can understand it is essentially the essence of teaching, isn't it? Is delivering content or learning in a way that your student understands. And that means both related to their age level, but also related to them as a person, as an individual.
Yeah, I've had 3-year-olds, 3-year-olds in nurseries come up to me and say, Karen, I felt my meerkat jumping last week. And I'm just like, that's like how a 3-year-old, and we shouldn't be surprised at this, but we are, but a 3-year-old is able to recognise their feelings, their thoughts, their emotions, and understand that, okay, they might not know exactly what's going on in their brain, but they know that meerkat is jumping, therefore they need to do their breathing, they need to, feel calm. And I think, wow, that is just so incredible. And if we were all taught that from a really young age, how different we might be as adults and adolescents.
Yeah, I can certainly see myself needing to understand what the meerkat's doing at certain points. Knowing that there's a wise owl there as well is a pretty reassuring addition to that.
Yeah.
So this is all this is in the field of giving students the opportunity to feel their emotions, to feel their emotional well-being as well, because obviously the calmer we feel, the better we'll feel. And also you're almost arming students with these tools to build their resilience, because if you're able to calm yourself down in a moment of high pressure, then that will teach you next time how to deal with that situation a little bit better, which will therefore improve your resilience. So you're the expert on this, Karen, not me. So resilience in young people, in children. What does this really look like in practice? What does resilience really mean, and how can we improve that in children?
Absolutely. I think resilience, some people think that with resilience, it's about bouncing back from situations. I don't necessarily think it is always about bouncing back. It's just about having the mechanisms or the coping strategies to maybe cope with what's happening. I think when we say things like bouncing back from situations, it sounds like we kind of flip-flop. We maybe... And with bouncing back, we have to go back to go forwards, and that's not always the case. I think we're always striving to be forward, and I think with resilience, it's just about having that moment that when you're feeling that panic or that anger, it's just about thinking what's next and playing that out in our heads. Because with resilience, that can definitely be built up, but it's how we approach that to start with. For me, resilience is about situations and just creating more and more sort of almost embedding how we can cope with situations to keep moving forward, to keep moving forward. So for me, I would say resilience is about how young people can adapt and continually strive to move forward. And actually, sometimes when we get things wrong or we don't do things right, that's where resilience is built. It's not always about being perfect or about us trying to, avoid situations when we do things wrong. I'm always the first to say, I made a mistake there, or maybe I should have done this a bit better. And I think that's where resilience starts, it starts, but it never ends. You can never be too resilient, I don't think. I think you can always continue to build on your resilience, because there will be times in your life where that resilience will drop, or you won't be as resilient as you thought you were. And that's okay as well. So it's just about continually moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. You can't achieve resilience.
No.
Reach a state of resilience. Yeah.
Could you imagine an exam in resilience?
I know. That would be cruel. It's like those exams, the kind of essay questions, what is courage or something, and someone's written "this is" at the end of their 6-page answer. No, it's certainly, it's very beneficial to look at resilience in a way that isn't just tied to exams and academics, but actually to see resilience as something that children can constantly practice and constantly live, essentially. Now, I'm interested, do you talk about the word resilience explicitly with the children you work with? Do they know that that's what you're working on at the time, for example?
I think depending on the age, I probably wouldn't go into a nursery and talk about resilience in that form. Obviously, there's stories and things you can use without necessarily saying, today we're going to learn about resilience. But I think everything that Mind Marvels do encaptures resilience. So it's all about helping us to build up, I suppose, our courage as well, isn't it? Our emotions, identify them, situations, how we cope with them. So I don't necessarily always talk about resilience, but the outcome, and especially when talking with teachers and head teachers, is that children will feel enhanced resilience. And I think actually now in primary schools, resilience is spoken about quite a bit. I think I think a lot of young people are aware of what resilience is. So it's not quite the complicated educational word that used to be, where you'd think, well, I don't really know what resilience is. But actually now you'll find young people talking about it a lot more without me necessarily prompting them.
Which is the sign of learning, isn't it?
Yes. And it's a sign that children and young people are talking more about mental health in schools, and it's a sign that teachers and tutors are having that conversation and that open dialogue. And I think that's so refreshing, and again, so needed as well.
Yeah, that was sort of the reason for my question was to try and demonstrate to those tutors and educators listening about simple practical things like, do you mention the word resilient, or do you just kind of build it into your session? And I think the answer is, probably don't start too young, but being open about what you're trying to help the child with, or being open, not hiding from words like resilience and mental health, I think is the key. And I think that will help to break down those barriers of the taboo that it has been for so long.
Absolutely. And I when I go in, as long as it's deemed appropriate, I will talk about my own mental health journey. If it's older children, if it's younger children, I will say I used to have that feeling in my tummy, that that funny feeling in my stomach. And I think sometimes when you do this, kids are like, oh wow, she's real. Because I don't know how open teachers are. And I think coming from a teaching background, I was always a bit aware about that, talking about your own mental health journey. Well, she should be able to. There's always that sort of professional boundary, and you kind of feel like, oh, I don't want to overstep. But in my new role, I'm quite happy to go in, because this is why I do this. I'm not going in like saying, I've had a great mental health journey. No, there's been some real rubbish times. There's been, especially as a teenager, there was times where I didn't even know what anxiety was, but I felt that feeling in my stomach. We call it like dogging off school up here. So it would be like taking, just skipping school essentially, because you thought you were so sick, but actually it was just anxiety, but nobody told you, so you didn't know. So I find that really refreshing, how you can just go in when appropriate and talk about your own mental health journey. Yeah,
exactly. It confused me slightly there, because in the transcription, that's the ongoing transcription that's happening on my Zoom screen right now, when you said in my new role, it came up as in my noodle. So I was slightly confused, but
I'm really... It's going to be pretty funny watching these subtitles, I think.
Karen and I were talking just before we started the conversation about how a Scottish accent and many popular transcription services, there's not quite a kind of synergy there every time. It's actually been quite amusing reading what's been coming up.
See, this is why I've turned it off. I don't want to know what it says.
I might share the original transcription as well as the kind of correct transcription after this, so you can maybe send it to Zoom and just say this is not acceptable. Anyway, just to finish, Karen, because I hate bringing a conversation to an end. It just really felt there that you were getting into something important and perhaps personal about your experience, your background, and how that's led you to where you are today, which is really the essence of why we bring guests onto the podcast, is to learn how successful people have gone from where they were before to where they are now, and how that can provide inspiration. So I don't mean to cut it short, but we must respect our listeners' attention span. But what's next for Mind Marvels? What's the kind of next year look like?
Really, really interesting. So we're looking to now franchise the business out. So I'm looking to speak with fellow and perhaps current teachers and tutors that are looking to maybe embark on something similar, where they are teaching young people about their own mental health. So I would really love to see Mind Marvels all around the UK. I think it's just so well needed, and I've put so much work into the business with the lesson plans and developing the brand that actually it should be available to every sort of council region in the UK. I'm also looking to develop an online school resource so that young people can access Mind Marvels through their own teachers as well in classroom teaching. And I think it's just more about where are we going to be in the next 5 years. It's too exciting. I've got so many plans, merchandise and ways to help sort of young people at home as well. So it's really about just expanding Mind Marvels into all areas of young people and adults, of course, lives too. So really, really exciting times. Watch this space, as they say.
Right, who wants to stick with us for the next 30 minutes to unpick Karen's business strategy, her 5-year plan? I feel like that was a hint there to us.
No, it's really, I think once you start this journey of, being an entrepreneur, it's just, where does it stop? Because you just get more, it's like a snowball effect. You start off really small and then things just escalate and escalate. So I'm so thrilled to be doing something that I don't even consider a job, to be honest.
Well, there's Karen's call to action for you guys out there. If you are in the sphere of mindfulness and mental health and supporting students with neurodiverse students, then there's a role for you. There's an opportunity for you. There's a partnership there for you with Mind Marvels, especially as Karen was mentioning there that she's looking to move into England as well from Scotland. So. Thank you so much, Karen. That was a really fun, really enjoyable and really informative conversation as well. I hope for those of you out there, certainly for me, certainly learning about the animal brain and for the tutoring that I do to my own students. With my own students. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much for having me. And also, we're on all social media, just as Mind Marvels, one word, and we put loads of free resources out there. So please feel free to like or follow and come and see what we do.
Those will also be in the show notes below, as well as the Mind Marvel, the Animal Brain, the Mind Marvels Animal Brain link, and also to Karen's website, mindmarvels.co.uk. So give Karen a follow. Keep up with the journey, keep up with the space that is developing that Karen just told us there, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, Karen.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. Whether you're a regular listener of this podcast or you've just stumbled across it, join the Qualified Tutor podcast group within the Qualified Tutor community to stay up to date with our latest news, offers, workshops, and of course, simply to meet other tutors like you. Whatever your level as a tutor, our training courses will be the next step in your professional development. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/training to find out more about our CPD accredited and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. Your student deserves the best tutor possible. Make that happen today by joining Qualified Tutor